This is the end of the beginning. Welcome to today's show. This is an important show. I've covered FedNow for a couple of years now since they announced that they were going to begin rolling this out. Of course, what they do is they roll these things out. They try to desensitize people to what it really is and make it seem like it's just something that's here to be quicker and faster and be convenient for everybody out there. It's not about control or anything like that. And then, of course, you get deflection from the liberal media, which, of course, is the communist regime, state media, who's going to come out and cover this as if it's a good thing. This is the worst possible thing. This is the New World Order currency. And this is all leading towards the destruction of the dollar, the destruction of things like PayPal and Zeal, and the beginning of a controlled currency, which will be just like what you saw going on in places like China. We see it going on all the time now. But you see it going on, or we saw it going on in Canada, where they were freezing people's bank accounts. Now, the naive person out there is so narcissistic, they don't think that the government is going to get into this and do this to people. But I'm going to show you exactly why and how this all ties into climate change, and people need to know about it. So let's start with the fact that FedNow has been rolled out. They don't want to make it seem like they're forcing it down your throat because that makes people suspicious. So what they do is they roll these things out, and then they desensitize you to it. They roll it out. They don't do anything. You won't hear stories about, oh my goodness, did you know that the government froze someone's bank account? No, they're not going to tell you that stuff yet. They're going to make it seem like it's safe. They're going to begin by rolling it out, telling you how great it is, and they use things just like we heard with 5G, right? Oh, it's so much faster. Oh, it's so much quicker. Nobody thought about or had any concerns about the effects that 5G has on your brain and on your body with the radiation. It was just about you downloading a song faster, even though nobody sees a difference between 4 and 5G. It's the same with this type of stuff. They start advertising it as a faster way to process payments. Here's the rollout this week, and stay with me because there's stuff I need to show you so you can understand and share this with your friends.
Well, digital payment platforms, they provide a convenient method of moving money that many people now use in their everyday lives.
As the demand for speedy and secure payments increases, a new platform is making its way into the global economic picture. KITV4's Robert Buon has this story, which is new at 6.
Digital payment platforms have been around since the late 90s, but the advent of PayPal in 2000 really changed the game. The first of the services to build relationships with the banks and financial institutions, it was a major advantage in securing public confidence. That game changer paved the way for Venmo, Zelle, Cash App, and others now part of the everyday financial landscape. Starting this month, enter FedNow. It's the Federal Reserve's digital platform promising to offer higher levels of transactional speed.
So payments settle instantly between financial institutions. This is a much faster way to settle payments than traditional methods like ACH, debit, credit cards, checks, and wires.
And transfers in a platform secure enough for payments beyond person-to-person transactions.
Using the input from banks and credit unions, and it'll have, things like account-to-account transfers, consumer-to-business transfers, like, when you're paying a bill, business-to-business, government-to-business, consumer-to-government.
Just now at the front end of the program's rollout, the first institution in the state offering it to its members is Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union.
2 years ago, we were lucky to be chosen as one of the 120 pilot organizations that was chosen by the Federal Reserve Bank to be part of this development process. And for us, we thought it was important to be part of that, was because, for one, our members were really demanding it. You talked about Zelle and Venmo. A lot of our members use that type of service now.
That's the good news for those eager to use the new convenience. The bad news?
One of the things that with this system, since it's new, both the sender and receiver institution need to be on the system. So it will start to grow as more financial institutions jump on. Then our members are going to start to see the money coming through faster.
More details about FedNow are available through branches and customer service representatives at your bank or credit union.
So they roll this whole thing out, right? They're telling you that, well, at first it's going to be voluntary. Banks are going to have to sign up for this, right? Then you'll start hearing other stories creep in. What are those other stories? You'll hear stories about processing payment sites like Zeal and like PayPal. Processing payments down, slow to be paid. Oh, you didn't get paid for your work because of their processing center being down. This is done by design. The same way you're seeing on the flip side of that, our government spiking interest rates all over the place. It just seems like every month they're spiking interest rates. The common young person out there doesn't know the effects of that. They don't realize this stuff, but everybody should be realizing it, right? Because I'm sure people out there are complaining when they're going to the grocery store and they're seeing what their bill is, or they're going to get gas and they're seeing what their bill is. This is all done by design. The government is bankrupting everybody. And instead of fighting, they want you fighting with each other over your political affiliation, whether it's Trump or whether it's Biden, whether it's left or it's right. That's how they keep you stuck in this instead of going after them. They're the ones who are causing the prices to be what they are. Not Trump, not Biden. This beast system, this cabal that's in control. They're doing it by design. So they're bankrupting people and they're killing off the dollar. So there's no value in the dollar so that they can have this controlled currency. You understand? This controlled currency, they'll be like, oh, that's great. I can get paid. I don't even have to do anything. It is going to be like a minimal allowance. And as I show you throughout this video, they're going to begin taking things away from you. That's what it's about, but not at first, because again, they desensitize people. I talked about this stuff with everything that we see going on now. I talked about how they were desensitizing people to adulting children and all these TV shows a decade ago. Now, where do you see what they're trying to do? You see what they're trying to do with castration and everything else? People are like, how did we get to this point? I was telling you how. They were desensitizing you by adulting children right in front of your faces. Okay? How do we get to the point where we're allowing Satanists and all this other crap to go on? They desensitize people. Oh, we don't worship the devil. Hail Satan. We don't worship Satan at all. But our logo is Satan, and it's the name of our company. It's run by the government, by the CIA. Oh, don't worry about it. And we just allow them into schools. We allow them into, a local public office and things like that. And people just go, oh, okay, well, oops. And they move on with their life. That's what they're going to do here. So let's take a look at some of the stuff going on with the digital payment that you need to know about. There's going to be a huge run on deflection, okay? We hear it all the time now. We see the mainstream media cover and quote unquote, they claim to be debunking conspiracy. They go out there and they make up lies. Then the common person out there just repeats what they hear from the mainstream media without thinking. So what you're seeing now is NBC, all the mainstream media coming out with these complete clowns who talk about Fed now, and they're like, it's not going to be what all the conspiracy theorists say. Well, of course it's not going to be right this second, because people will go and grab their pitchforks. They won't allow it to happen. So listen to this clown. This is the type of propaganda they're putting out there. Well, they'll show people like DeSantis, who everything he says obviously makes sense, but he's playing his role in this. Oh, the Fed is going to, they're going to make sure and block you from buying guns, and they're going to do all these things. Yes, they are, but really they're going to block you from buying food and other things, not guns. Okay, they already can do that if they want to. They already have enough things in place for that. But listen to this propaganda, because this is the type of propaganda we're going to see all the time going forward.
How quickly can we debunk these conspiracy claims that government officials
want the Fed to control a digital dollar? You go and use too much gas, they're going to stop it. They're not going to honor the.
And let's do this without getting technical. So for one, this digital dollar, it doesn't exist in the United States. And the Fed says even if it wants to make one, it would need Congress's blessing. Two, this Fed Now service, it's real, but it's separate. It's basically an update that's meant to move money from bank to bank as fast as Venmo does. So instead of the traditional 2 to 3 business days, it would happen within seconds. It does not change the privacy of your personal checking account or threaten your transactions. So if you hear people say,
you want to go buy a rifle, they're going to say no.
Just know that's not happening.
So that doesn't debunk anything, but people out there will repeat it. And they'll be like, it's been debunked already. That's not debunking. That's politicizing this stuff with left and right and things like guns that are sensitive topics. This is giving the government total control over your bank account. This is giving the government total control of your life. And you might say, well, why would the government, that's the next thing that comes, right? Why would the government ever do that to me? Why would the government do that to, well, they're going to do it to you whether you're liberal or conservative. It's nothing specifically to do with your political views, even though, yes, people like me specifically, I will be targeted based on being out there speaking about this stuff. And I will have my bank account frozen and all of that if I continue to go out speaking about this stuff, or at least online speaking about it. Eventually, I'm going to have to go out and speak on the streets because they continue to take away my audience. They continue to take away my voice. Even if I don't have an audience, they don't let me talk. So I'll be a target. Some of you might be like, well, I'm not doing any of that stuff. Oh, yeah? Well, if you even watch the type of content, you will be blocked. If you share the type of content, you will be blocked. And it has more to do with your control, or their control, over your every move, which I'll get into, which has everything to do with all of the climate change propaganda you're seeing. But let's move into the next phase of this, okay? The president of the Central European Bank, Christine Lagarde, however you say the name of this demon, talks about how we need to move towards digital currency. Now, they've been saying this stuff, but they don't want you to feel like you're forced into it. So they say, well, we're seeing more and more people aren't using cash anymore. They're using digital. So as we continue to go that route, we don't want to make you feel like we're going to take the dollar away. No. We'll just do things like what you're seeing right now behind everyone's backs, which is really in front of our faces, which is the interest rate spikes, the destruction of the value of the dollar, while they're telling us that we're going to transition into digital currency. And eventually, people will be so desensitized and so used to paying online, which is the whole point of Zeal and PayPal and everything else, so that people will just go, well, what's the big deal? But once you don't have cash, people don't seem to understand. Then you have no control. They have full control of your money. You know the old sayings about hiding money under your mattress? People used to do that because they didn't trust the government. So why would anybody trust the government when they see what's going on right now, right? Why would anybody trust them, what we see going on in the last couple of years, left or right? That's why we should be uniting together. I'm not Republican or liberal. It's all fake. It's a means and a mechanism of division, right? We should all be banding together. Who cares what your skin color is? Who cares what your take is on political topics, okay? These people do not care. And eventually the liberals are going to see that this whole thing has been a ruse. It's been, it's like somebody who's in a relationship and they look back and they're like, oh man, I really got played. Yeah, you're getting played on both sides, but specifically the liberal side of this. So here's this woman talking about the destruction of, going and turning into a digital currency is the way that we're headed.
People are increasingly paying digitally instead of using cash. Almost half of euro area consumers say that they prefer to pay with cashless means of payment, such as cards. We will continue to provide cash. But if it is used less and less for payments, public money could ultimately lose its role as the monetary anchor for the hybrid model, threatening its key function in securing trust in payments, with implications for the economy. Payments are a public good that is simply too important to be left to the market only.
Now, people out there, they see this, and I get it. They're like, oh, well, obviously, we all pay with PayPal. I mean, what are you talking about, man? You don't use a credit card and all that stuff? It's about the destruction, the not allowing cash anymore. And they could sit here and say, well, it's not being used. It's a waste of time for us to print it, right? But this whole mechanism that's in place is all about carbon emissions. And everybody hears that and they don't realize what's going on because they're telling you that it's hot when it's normally hot. And even if it's a little bit hotter where you are, guess what? You're not going outside and melting, so you have nothing to fear. They tell you about ice caps melting in places conveniently that nobody's allowed to go visit, right? You're not allowed to go visit there. Isn't that interesting? The Antarctica, this piece of land that's supposedly just this big block of ice, all the countries around the world have a stake in that? I wonder what that's about. That's another story for another day for those of you out there that know what I'm talking about. So this is going to be marketed as faster and the end of free money. The end of free money is another trigger term that they're using to market towards liberals who don't realize that the whole liberal communist movement is run by corporations. They're talking about how corporations aren't going to get away with this stuff anymore, and they're going to have to pay their fair share, and the rich are going to have to pay their taxes. They don't realize that all of the corporations are run by communist liberals. They just don't realize what's actually happening. So you'll hear end of free money marketing and all that type of stuff, but this is the key to everything, and that's the carbon footprint. So all the propaganda you've seen about the carbon and the climate over and over and over is about controlling every single aspect of your life. And this is what they'll do. They will desensitize you. They'll begin like they're doing right now, where they're trying to get you to willingly participate in this stuff, right? So they're saying voluntarily limit your carbon footprint. So people are now just learning about carbon footprint. They're like, what does that even mean? They're like, well, why don't you try to drive less or fly less or carpool? So people are little by little picking up on these little enslavement things that they're hinting at. Don't eat meat, right? That's where it's headed towards, and eat bugs. But they know that they can't push that as hard right now. What they'll do is you'll wake up and there won't be meat at the grocery anymore. But they use these little tactics, right? And they want you to voluntarily submit it first, knowing that they're going to do it by force. But they don't want you to be suspicious. So they say, we're going to have you, your carbon footprint is something you can control. Do the right thing. Be a good person. Where did we hear that before? Well, we heard that in the beginning about wearing masks, right? What happened after that? Well, you weren't allowed to go in stores. We heard that in the beginning about potions, right? Well, what happened after a few months when you didn't do it voluntarily? Well, people lost their jobs. People weren't allowed to go to hospitals. All sorts of things were going on, right? Started voluntarily, then turned into mandates and force. Carbon is the same exact way. I'll play and show this to you so you can understand. First, you'll hear the guy at the World Economic Forum talk about a carbon footprint. Layman's terms, a carbon footprint is a mechanism of tracking your every single move, right? You might say that sounds like a conspiracy. Okay, well, everything that emits carbon, that means, and they explain it and break it down. That means the littlest thing like farting, like opening your refrigerator door, like using your phone, like walking to your mailbox. These are all things that emit carbon footprint, right? Or part of your carbon footprint. They're all monitored and tracked, which is why they've prepared people with things like the Fitbit and all this to track your every move where you're doing it to yourself, okay? These are all parts of the carbon footprint. Eventually, it goes from voluntary to them coming out and saying, hey, we asked everybody out there to limit their carbon footprint, but the earth is going to explode. It's going to burn. And if we don't do something now, everybody's going to be doomed. So the government's going to step in and protect you. The government's going to step in, and we're now going to put a limit on all of your banks, all the things you're buying and selling. We're going to monitor all of it so that we can keep the carbon emissions lower and we won't all die. And everyone will just be like, oh, wow, they really care about us. Look what they're doing here. Now the planet's better. And then the media will tell you on the news that it's not as hot as it used to be. And all these suckers will just believe it. They'll be like, oh, look, it's working. It's not as hot as it used to be. So we all just need to bite the bullet for a little bit and it'll never end because it's global enslavement. But here they are talking about the carbon footprint. And here is what the carbon footprint is for those of you that don't understand what the climate change agenda is about.
We're developing through technology an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
If you want to work out your own carbon footprint, you need to know the amount of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide you're responsible for creating. It's a difficult thing to measure precisely, and there are different definitions about how best to calculate it. But roughly speaking, there's the direct impact of using energy when we travel or to power our homes. And there's the indirect impact of the energy that's used to create all the things we use or consume. In the developed world in particular, transport is a big part of your carbon footprint. Cutting down on the use of petrol or diesel cars and taking fewer flights is one of the most effective ways of reducing it. The place you live also contributes to your personal footprint. It's important to make sure your home is heated or cooled efficiently and is well insulated. The more you can use sustainable energy like solar or wind power, the more you cut your emissions. The stuff you use at home also adds to the problem. All that plastic, metal and cardboard takes a lot of energy to produce and dispose of. So recycling can help reducing your carbon footprint, but not as much as how you travel or heat and cool your home. Then there's your diet. Above all, red meat makes your carbon footprint bigger because cows produce so much methane, another greenhouse gas, and huge numbers of trees are cut down to create pastures on which cattle can graze. In the developing world, polluting stoves are a real problem too, so it's important to try to replace them with more efficient methods of cooking. But overall, people in poorer countries produce far smaller amounts of greenhouse gases than people in richer countries do. So, if you look at just what a country produces, the average amount of carbon dioxide emissions per person in the United States is about 16.1 tonnes per year. In China, it's 7.1 tonnes, and in the UK, it's about 5.5 tonnes. But in the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's only 0.03 tonnes, while in Qatar, which has a really small population but produces so much oil and gas, it's 38.6 tonnes. Now, that's just production. It doesn't take account of all the other things we've talked about, how much you consume. But obviously, the more money you have, the more you tend to consume. So if people in richer countries really want to reduce their carbon footprint, they need to make huge changes in their lifestyles. It can be done. New technologies to make things greener are coming on stream all the time. But it is a reminder that the declared aim in many countries of going carbon neutral by the middle of this century means a revolution in the way we live.
In 2018, the United Nations released an urgent report emphasizing the need to cut carbon emissions in half by 2030 in order to avoid an irreversible climate crisis. The average consumer in Sweden causes around 10 tons of carbon emissions each year, of which 60% is linked to consumption. Later in 2018, Doconomy, a Swedish fintech, took on the challenge and launched Do, a mobile banking service for everyday climate action. The Do app is connected to a credit card that enables users to track and measure their carbon footprint from each purchase and to compensate for its impact day by day. This spring, Doconomy took its fight against climate change one step further by adding a premium credit card to its offer. But instead of introducing a premium credit card with the typical benefits that encourages further mass consumption, Doconomy did the opposite by launching Do Black, the world's first credit card with a carbon limit. Simply put, it's the first credit card ever to stop you from overspending, not based on your available funds, but rather on the levels of CO2 emissions caused by your consumption. Do Black helps you track your climate impact and ensures that you reduce it by 50% in line with the UN 2030 recommendation.
The core purpose of Do Black is not only the ability to measure the impact of your consumption, but also bringing it to a direct halt, making it a radical tool against climate change.
For years, credit cards have put a limit on our credit. Do Black puts a limit on our impact.
So after seeing all that, start piecing this stuff together, right? You get rid of cash, and people are just like, what's the big deal? The Fed now, we have PayPal. They don't get it, okay? When the government has full control over your money, people are just like, well, I'm a liberal, so they're not going to freeze my bank account. I'll go along with what they say. Oh, yeah? What about when Trump is put back in office? Huh? And then they decide to freeze your bank account because you're not being, whatever they call it, extremist enough for them. It goes both ways. It's a seesaw of emotion. Right? I get it. The liberals are the ones who are regurgitating all the messaging that the state-run media is putting out there about climate change. They're the ones pushing all that stuff, even though some conservatives still push it, or they act like it's not a big deal, and they don't explain to their audience what it's really about. And that's why people like me are censored, because we can't explain what it's about. I'm trying to break it down as simply as possible in this video for you, right? So let's go back through it. You get the Fed now. You get them coming in with this and saying voluntarily, the Federal Reserve is going to have a currency, okay? And it's going to be fast, right? Just like we heard with 5G. No one noticed the difference. Oh, it's going to be fast. Ooh, faster, right? They start creating all these events with Zeal and PayPal processing where people aren't getting paid on time. So people start going, oh, well, that's instant. I don't have to wait, 24 hours for the bank to clear my check. Everything's instant. Oh, great. Okay, so they start working people towards it voluntarily, right? People start getting in. We start seeing the dollar just getting destroyed on the other side of it where they don't correlate the two connected to each other when they're fully connected to one another, okay? Then what starts happening? Well, then they start coming out and telling you that, well, nobody's using cash anymore anyway, so we're going to start going towards this. Oh my goodness, did you see that Zeal and PayPal and the banks were having all these other issues where people weren't able to get their money? We need something better, right? That's what all these bank crashes have been about. These small banks going under. They'll continue to go under. And what will happen? Well, they'll put you in this trusted thing like the Fed now, where guess what? None of the money can be lost. Every dollar can be accounted for, and the Fed isn't printing free money anymore. Those are the ways they'll market it. It's all a scam. It's done by design, like everything else they do, right? So then the system is in place, okay? Then the system's in place. Then they take it to the next phase, right? So now everybody's in, they're doing the Fed now. They're like, look, all the conspiracy theorists who are yelling about how is a one world currency of enslavement, they're all idiots because nothing's happened, right? Then they come in with their climate agenda. And these idiots won't connect the dots between the two because they'll say they're completely different things because the climate's a real thing, right? They're being convinced day in and day out about the climate. Do they have the ability to manipulate the weather? Yes. Do they? Yes. Look above you, the streaks in the sky on a daily basis. They do manipulate it, but they can't manipulate it to the point where it's 150 degrees outside in Montana. They just can't do that, right? So they need to psychologically convince you that it's hotter than it really is, even though it's in the 70s on the East Coast. Brr, oh my goodness. I mean, oh, I'm sweating so much. Oh, it's so hot. In Maine and Vermont and New York and New Jersey and North Carolina. Give me a break. It's a typical summer. But if they tell you enough, if they repeat the lie enough, people start to believe it and then regurgitate it. So every day you just hear the propaganda about how hot it is. Then you're at the water cooler and some idiot's like, boy, it's really hot. Like, okay, well, it is July, right? Is it 175 degrees out? Are you melting? Are you walking outside and, turning into the Wicked Witch? No, you're not. So what are you concerned about? Oh, right, because you're under mind control. Because this whole thing is a psychological op. So you're now repeating what they want you to repeat, right? So now as they put these systems in place, they begin this huge propaganda, which really, we've heard it over the last couple of years, how hard they've been pushing climate change, but that's the end phase of Agenda 2030. It's the climate agenda, which is the control agenda. Blame it on the boogeyman. Oh, you can't blame us. We don't want control over your finances. We don't want control over this or that. Oh, okay. Right. So then when they freeze people's bank accounts because they don't like what they say or what they're talking about, they'll never be held accountable, just like the current regime. That's exactly how it's going to look. They don't answer questions. They don't, they don't represent you because they don't do anything. Right? And they could freeze your bank account and not answer questions like Trudeau did. So then we go into the next phase, which is the climate phase, which I've been saying. And then they come out and they say, look, people aren't voluntarily doing enough. But with the carbon footprint, which will be tied into this digital currency, we could come in and we'll monitor all your things. Every person gets a 1,500 carbon credits a day or whatever it ends up being, right? You won't realize that taking a dump or taking a shower is like 750 credits, right? People just think, oh, I get something? I get free credits, right? They've been conditioning people with all these emoji things that people pay with now. Like you probably see in the super chats, like, oh, give somebody a smiley face and they get $5. And it's like, they're transitioning people. This is what it's going to be like, tokens, right? The digital tokens that we see with crypto and all this nonsense. So anyway, they'll start doing that. Oh, you get 1,500 little gold stars. And everyone will be like, oh, little gold pentagrams. No, they won't because they don't realize what's going on. But they'll be like, little gold stars, that's great. And they'll say, okay. And then people will start realizing, wait a minute. I just wanted to go see my grandma dying in the hospital and I wasn't able to leave my house. And I wasn't able to go do this. They shut my bank account off because I exceeded my limit. Well, there's a problem. I'm going to call right now. Oh, wait, I can't call anybody. Kind of like with places like YouTube where you can't call and contact anyone, right? You're going to try to call the Fed. Hey, Fed, you froze my account. You can call Bank of America. You can call Wells Fargo. You can't call the Fed, right? So then what are you going to do? You're going to put your phone down. You're like, this is bullcrap. You're going to complain online and nothing's going to get resolved. Then you're going to realize that you've been enslaved. And then you're going to have to comply to their rules. And they're going to tell you it's for the benefit of humanity, right? And half the population will believe it because they're dumb. And they'll be like, well, this is for everybody out there, and they'll complain about it privately with their other lib friends, but they'll go about it, right? And then they'll just go, oh my gosh, I wanted to go see my daughter, her wedding. I couldn't go to her wedding because I ate meat that month. And since I ate meat, my carbon footprint was way too high. And then they'll say, how did we get to this point? Oh, right. Well, it started with us believing the government, trusting the government, looking at the left-right paradigm. Then it turned into how they just told us how dangerous, cash was and banking was getting hijacked. So we needed to go to the Fed currency. Then the government had full control over all the currency. And I thought it was a conspiracy of these Looney Tunes out there who were saying the government's going to freeze your accounts and do all this stuff. Then they told us about the climate, and I didn't put one and one together. I thought that they just were talking about being a good person. Then they went after me, and I believed in their system, and I trusted it, and they froze my bank account. They didn't let me go see grandma. They didn't let me go to the grocery store. They didn't let me shower that week because I used too many of my credits. Everything ties into the credit system. Every mechanism of control imaginable. Every breath you take, every move you make, yeah, Big Brother will be watching you. So this is the dangers of FedNow, and this is what's happening right in front of our faces. So be prepared and be ready. Share this video with people. Let them know there's still a voice out there screaming, trying to get this message out as much as they're trying to silence this voice. Subscribe to my channels. Join the website. Help any way you can, but get the word out. I thank everyone for being here. I hope you're doing well. I hope this is something you can share because it's pretty easy to figure out if you just pay attention long enough. And I know a 30-minute, 20-minute video is hard for people to stay and pay attention to, but hopefully they did. I thank you again. God bless all of you and your families.